Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is Tuesday, June 17th, 2025, and I'm Jer Stays, coming to you from our studio at Techtown in the Paris of the Midwest, the city of Detroit. Joining me across the table is none other than the excellent, wonderful, and talented Annalise Frank. Welcome back to the show.
So good to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Annalise does excellent work at Axios Detroit, a newsletter that you should read every morning. And we're going to be talking about a couple of stories. One, I think, is a lot of fun, really interesting, about biking across an international border. The Gordie Howe Bridge will be something you can cross on two wheels. We're going to get into that. And then we're going to discuss the mayoral debate that happened on Monday night. A piece that I thought was really interesting that you did recently in Axios Detroit, the Gordie Howe Bridge may become a global cycling destination. Why don't you tell me about that? That seems really cool.
Yeah, so we know that the International Gordie Howe Bridge between Windsor and Detroit will have a pedestrian lane. So essentially it's one lane of traffic that's, of course, segmented off from traffic where you can walk and bike. And I got interested, we've known this was coming for a while. Bridge is under construction, expected to open in the fall, unless that gets pushed back. We've known there's going to be a pedestrian lane, but I happened to see recently that the Detroit Greenways Coalition, which is, a local advocacy group, they're creating a guide to how to use the multi-use pathway because it's kind of complicated. I mean, you're going across an international border on foot, on a bike. It's different from, going in a car, going on the bus. And so there's a lot of logistics to figure out. And I love some nitty-gritty logistics. So I was very interested in this. And so I talked to Todd Scott, who's with the Detroit Greenways Coalition. And he talked about how, there's all these questions can you go halfway and go back? And how do you, it's free, which will be nice. It's toll free. But what happens if you go over and there's horrible weather and you're stuck because you can't get across the bridge on foot? There's all these things to kind of figure out. And so that's what I came at it from. But then he was talking about how people are really underestimating the tourism impact that this could have. It's a big deal to go across an international border on a bicycle. And it would connect this really long, massive trail, the Trans-Canada Trail. It would be, I think, the first international crossing of that trail. And so it could be a big piece of the route for a long distance biker. And he thinks that, with how Detroit is growing and how interesting this crossing is and how beautiful the bridge is going to be, that people are going to want to make this part of their Trans-America-Canada route if they're a really hardcore cyclist.
Well, I think it also gives people another way to go over and explore Windsor.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't done any cycling exploration of Windsor. I want to now, but he's talking about how, you could wake up in Detroit and cycle across the bridge and go to wine country in Windsor, kind of just this flat, beautiful areas. You could go to Point Pelee Park. There's some options for sort of this sightseeing that would be just a couple hours bike ride.
I'm going to be honest, Annalise, this sounds idyllic and extremely pleasant.
Doesn't it sound cute? Yeah. I mean, I haven't done it, so I can't confirm, but it certainly sounds nice. And, for Canadians, it'll connect to the Iron Bell Trail. It connects to the Joe Louis Greenway. So, which, isn't done, but will, someday be done. It's just very interesting. And I think that one other thing he mentioned is the businesses near the bridge, on the Detroit side, we need to create more bicycle infrastructure for Canadian tourists who might want to come over and hang out and go to restaurants in Southwest and stuff like that. So.
Another reason, too, for making sure that there are bike racks and all that kind of stuff, because I think about a number of businesses where I've seen stories recently where they've had some issues trying to put bike racks out front and stuff like that. And it feels like that's going to be even more important if you actually can bike the bridge. I think about cities I've visited that are bridged together and how cool it is. If you're crossing the Brooklyn Bridge or something like that. And it's just a part of everyday life. I know it's not going to be as much because it's an international border, but I hope that it's a portion of that, right? It could be very cool.
Yeah. I'm very interested to see how, they market it. I think it's they're going to have to make sure that people actually know about this and understand how to do it safely. All these context things that, are people going to know about this and know they can do it?
right, let's get to the big enchilada.
Yeah.
The Great Coney, the top corned beef egg roll of it all.
Haven't had those
yet. You should.
I know I should.
It's something. Anyway, the mayoral debate that aired on WDIV last night. What were some of your takeaways? Interesting format, reduced number of candidates, a lot of policy, but also some jabs.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely got a note at the top. This was 4 candidates. They were chosen based on polling. So, there were 5 candidates that weren't there. Of course, there's some concern from candidates who weren't there that they're not being heard. This was broadcast on Channel 4, and it can still be watched on YouTube. So, I don't know how many people watched it, but probably, more than maybe the Mackinac Conference debate. It's a highly televised debate. And so I think there's definitely some concern there. But yeah, in terms of the debate itself, I felt like you did get an idea of the platforms of each candidate. I mean, they're only speaking for a minute, which I'm sure is frustrating to them and maybe frustrating to voters who want to hear more. But you did get equal time from everyone. It was so interesting. They were allowing rebuttals, but no rebuttals occurred. I think like they offered one to James Craig and he turned it down. And like, there's a couple jabs that weren't specific enough to warrant a rebuttal per their rules. So we didn't see really a debate. There were only kind of a couple vague jabs, and then at the end there was a pretty interesting comment that we can get to from Santil Jenkins. But overall, they talked about the big issues, housing, public safety. Santil Jenkins went straight out of the gate with Detroit's financial situation. She sees herself as a mayor who would be able to tackle the financial reality of COVID, ARPA dollars going away. And so she really started straight out the gate with that. And she has, her plan of creating master plans in each district that is supposed to be kind of like a resident and business-led revitalization strategy. Mary Sheffield talked about, how she has this track record with city council of getting work done, economic development, how a foundation has been set and she wants to continue build upon that, do more. She knows the work's not done. She's talking about reforming property taxes, new ways to make revenue for the city, including potentially a half-penny sales tax, which I still need to kind of do my full research on that.
One of the challenges with any sales tax is that you need a change in Lansing because cities cannot levy sales taxes right now. And that really does push a lot of pressure on property taxes.
Yeah. And she and another candidate, council member Fred Durhall, have both been talking about ways to make revenue, make different revenue for the city that can kind of how do we reform property taxes? Basically, they've both been talking about, and how do we do that in a revenue neutral way? And so, I think that's a kind of issue. It's hard for the voter to discern who can do that better from like 1-minute answers, right? But it's definitely a big deal, as you're saying. We had James Craig talk about, his success leading the, as he says it, his success leading the police department. His big thing for him is this results-oriented, data-driven, system that he would have that would track everything from affordable housing to police, et cetera, that would kind of be used to further, improve things. He had a pretty interesting moment where they were talking about, Detroit Public Schools Community District and how, the challenges there, things could use improvement. And I'm trying to find the exact quote, but basically...
Yeah, Dr. Nikolai Vitti caught some strays.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, Superintendent Vitti. Craig kind of took a shot at him. He said, when I came in as a police chief, if I'd performed like the superintendent's been performing, in 6 months, I would have been fired. And so it's a pretty, I feel like, direct kind of jab there. He also said he'd work with Vitti, that kind of thing. But I'm sure it, might sting a little bit.
Kind of reflects, and he is the lone Republican in the race, it kind of reflects that more Trumpian style where I'm going to insult you, but then maybe work with you on something. Like nothing is ever permanent, right? It's like duck jab kind of situation. And it seemed to reflect that a little bit in that comment.
Yeah, and former Thaw CEO Santil Jenkins, I'll talk about what she said, but after she made this kind of critique of each candidate one by one, James Craig said, "Oh, the gloves are off now," but then he said, "But that's okay. Like, I'm fine with that," basically. And so he's kind of like, yeah, it is kind of like a willingness to engage, but also in a playful way, or a way, like you're saying,
Yeah, and it's challenging too when you're talking about things like the schools, because we did some reporting a little while ago, and what we found was that in Michigan, your school achievement basically tracks with the household income, like your grade level achievement tracks with your household income of the district you're serving. And so it's really tough because it's like, yes, we want to improve Detroit schools, but how much of the Detroit schools issue is straight up lack of resources at home? And that's something that no mayor can, like a mayor can control it in like the general of like, let's encourage people to make more money. But, so much with the schools is a difficult problem because it's not just like, well, teachers or this or that, especially in districts of a lot of need, it's multifaceted.
Yeah. I mean, that obviously makes you think of the governor's race and, what Mayor Mike Duggan has said about fixing the school system from the state level. And that's not something I've done a lot of reporting about, but it's certainly something we'll be talking about a lot in the next year, right? And I think that's something that interests me is how does a mayoral candidate acknowledge there's things they can't fix? And how do they be realistic about that without, I can't do anything.
Right, because I think a lot of people think about politics in a very like, well, you're the mayor, you can do whatever you want. Or you're the president, you can do whatever you want. And that isn't really how government works. There's a lot of real constraints, especially with a mayor who's got to be very focused on delivering services, getting things done, and on a tight budget. Only one candidate, James Craig, I think really looked at the root costs. So I know that everyone says like being revenue neutral, but one thing to look at too is looking at the costs. Are we delivering services at a good value price point as opposed to just, can we be revenue neutral? Are there ways we could do the same thing, but do it for less?
Yeah. And he wants to do sort of an audit of the finances and everything like that of the city. And so I think that would be so interesting to see how that would work.
The big viral moment that I saw on social media is Sonchiel Jenkins coming out swinging.
Yes. So I've got her full quote here. And then we'll go back to Pastor Kinloch, because I don't think we gave a summary for him, but we'll do that after this. Okay, so she said, she talked about her, her candidacy, she's the one you should vote for. And she said, the choice is clear. If you want a future that includes more guns in schools, locking up our kids, Craig is your guy. If you want a part-time mayor who's working 2 full-time jobs, Kinloch is ready. If you want a mayor who shows up on Instagram but doesn't show up for meetings, then follow Mary Sheffield, obviously. And then James Craig said the gloves are off comment. And that was really the most striking moment of like, ooh, of the debate.
I think what it does is show a clarity of message where we'd only seen that out of, say, Mary Sheffield and her big ad that she ran, like running for Detroit. She's been running this commercial, also online ad, where she's running through the city. She had a very clear message with that. And I saw that, and to me, what's notable about Jenkins with this is that clarity of message. I feel like a lot of people out there, like participating in this, the electorate, I feel like a lot of the electorate still like, they don't really know, like they know names, but they don't really have like the catch in of like, oh, this is what this person does. They really haven't formed their opinions. And I think that's kind of shown in this polling where, Sheffield, frankly, is in the catbird seat right now for the number 1 slot. Number 2 is very much up for grabs, at least according to the most recent polling.
Yeah, and lots of undecided. Like, yeah. I think, in the polling you're referencing, like 21% undecided. So, yeah, and she's trying to differentiate herself from her competitors. That's her job right now. And she's looking at what she sees as criticisms of these people that won't resonate with voters. I mean, you had Pastor Kinloch asked a question in this debate and in a past debate about, still preaching on Sundays while being in the mayor's seat. And, he has talked a lot about how, I don't run a church alone. I will have these other people running the church. And it's about collaboration, and that preaching on Sundays is part of like connecting with people. That would be a pro for him.
Yeah, I think he kind of used it as a way of keeping in touch with the community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas his detractors think it's a distraction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it depends what you believe and what you see with which way you see it. And, so voters can listen to what he says, listen to what other people say, and make up their minds on that. I definitely encourage people to watch the whole debate. It's very interesting. And then, I just wanted to note what Kinloch said after Jenkins. So that was in Jenkins' closing statement. And then after that, Kinloch's statement, he said, some of my opponents tonight evidently have forgotten that construction does not happen by destruction, that you cannot build yourself up by tearing other people down. So that's obviously like a callback to that, and that he did not appreciate that.
Why don't we talk about the front runner, Mary Sheffield? In these kind of debates, I think, just my experience, you don't really win debates per se, but you can very much lose them. And Sheffield, I think, held her ground, which is really all she has to do in this state right now, or in this case right now.
Yeah, I like to take these polls with a grain of salt, and Axios doesn't generally report on them unless they're above a certain threshold of sampling. So, there's kind of these caveats to the polls, but she is really seen as the front runner, like you're saying. And so unless something changes, it seems like she's going to make it through. But, what her campaign says is they're not taking their eye off the ball. And, she's just, preparing just as much as everyone else. And I'm trying to think about, kind of some of her standout moments. I mean, property taxes are huge for her. She says that's the real issue. And that's a huge piece for her, and something, she's going to try to tackle while touting what's already been done.
Yeah, that's something that I hear from listeners a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
Horse race coverage can get a little bit weird when it comes to politics, but I also know people fixate on the numbers. No matter how hard you try not to talk about those numbers, it's like trying to play a football game without a score. People want to know how many touchdowns there have been, or perceived touchdowns, I guess, in this case.
Yeah, and the part that I really want to learn more about is all these undecided voters. I mean, it's a quarter of people, and then also how many people that haven't voted before, or maybe haven't voted last election or something like that, are going to vote. What are these people going to do?
I would like a poll of unlikely voters, because I want to know why people are not I want data on why they're not engaged.
Let's see here. We talked about Kinloch in relation to Jenkins's comment. I think he talked a lot about some issues that were the reason he got in the race, including housing. Both him and Jenkins sort of referenced this, horrible situation where 2 children died who were unhoused at the time, and the cracks in the system that allowed that, and how that kind of situation can be prevented with increasing housing access overall. And so he said that issues like that are why he got in the race, and emphasized that the affordable housing that's been created isn't enough. We need more. This whole issue of area median income not matching up with Detroiter income. So how do you do that? How do you construction costs very high. So they talked about that a lot as well.
We do have more debates coming up. One of them will be one that I will be co-moderating with our friends at Outlier Media and the Eastside Community Network this Saturday, June 21st. Doors open at 10 a.m. Now, the tickets are sold out, but you can email me, dailydetroit@gmail.com. I'll make sure you're on the list to get a live stream link. Because we'll be streaming that live on our Daily Detroit YouTube page. I've done a lot of things, but this one I'll be honest, Annalise, I'm a little nervous. A little bit okay, how's this going to come together?
You're going to do great. We were talking a little bit about how hard it is to know how to handle a debate like that, or a forum, and how do you learn the most about each candidate when there's so many candidates, right? That'll be a challenge, and that's not your fault. But.
Well, that's one thing, there's a constant discourse I have heard about, should you have all the candidates involved versus, 4 candidates or polling candidates or whatever. And it's so tough because each format is going to have different strengths, right? So if you include all 9, it's almost impossible to hear from everybody for any sort of amount of time. If you include 4, well, there is a legitimate argument. Well, what about people that are outside of the polling range? And then if it's a one-on-one interview, which we've done some one-on-one interviews, I know you've talked one-on-one with some candidates, that is a good experience, but also provides very little room for pushback, because it's not our job as interviewers to prosecute the case for other candidates.
Yeah, and getting that back and forth between the candidates is really, I think, important. But how do you do that with, 7, 9 people?
Right.
I'm sad to miss that forum, and I hope it goes really well. And I will watch it. I assume it'll be available to watch afterwards as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Great. I'll be watching.
Annalise Frank, Axios Detroit. People can go check it out. I really encourage people to read it. It really is a good newsletter. You can go to axios.com/local/Detroit and follow things all Annalise.
Yes. Thank you so much. Good to be here. And appreciate listeners, readers. Always like to hear more of what people have to say about the race. So get in touch.
For sure. Well, feedback as always, dailydetroit@gmail.com or 313-789-3211. With that, I'm J.R. Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to our members on Patreon, patreon.com/dailydetroit. Local media needs local support to survive. With that, I'm J.R. Stays. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.